let's make a simple Pomodoro sauce that is rich with onion and garlic essence, beautiful fresh tomatoes or jarred tomatoes. I'm gonna show you how to use jarred today and have a really totally spectacular result. This is a recipe that I grew up smelling being made in my kitchen literally every weekend of my life. My grandfather is from Staten Island, Italian Irish boy, and he or my mother literally made the sauce every week. It's a great one to make a big batch and then let it cool entirely and freeze in portions that you can then use for pastas or pizzas or lasagnas or meatballs or just as soup. You can use it any number of ways. But it's really simple, and you'll see that at the end of this recipe, you will have found your favorite perfume: garlic cooking in olive oil. Let's make it. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna do is cut your onion up, or you can grate it if you prefer. I like to chop because I find that I can get like a little bit of color on it. You don't want a ton of color in tomato sauce, especially not a Pomodoro sauce. You're just looking to sort of like saute and wilt and evaporate some of the moisture out of your onion when you're cooking it before you start adding the other elements of the sauce. But I find if you get just like a little bit of golden brown color on it, I like it very much. So I'm going to chop. Go ahead and remove the skins. I removed both ends, leaving just a little bit of the root intact, which is going to help me chop it more easily. You've seen the chopping technique for onions before. Just quick chops down vertically, 2 quick chops across horizontally for this nice medium chop we're going to do, and then just slice it down. And then once you get to the sort of root side down here, I just flip it on its flat side and give it a quick chop up, and then discard the root. Other side next. Okay, now to a lovely heavy bottomed pan like so, over a medium high heat. Add about 5 tablespoons of olive oil, just enough to gently coat the bottom of the pan. We don't want these simmering away in tons of olive oil. It's just to really like gloss it up and give plenty of rich fat to complement the nice acidity of the tomatoes. Once the oils come up to heat, ideally, so when it's like shimmering on the surface is when you want to add your onions in. You can hear the ever so slight sizzle of the olive oil, and it's shimmering on its surface, which is the perfect time to add your onions in. And I used 1 whole onion, which is my preference, but you can just do half if you don't want quite so much oniony flavor. Go ahead and grab a wooden spoon of your choosing, which is an absolute must for perfect tomato sauce. Don't know why, can't tell you, but it's true. And just make sure the onions are all coated in that little bit of olive oil there at the bottom. I'm gonna let the onions saute 2 to 3 minutes just to immediately start to release that liquid and the water, have it evaporate, start to concentrate that onion flavor, and then I will actually salt afterwards to, again, release even more liquid. It's like the double condensation, which is great. All right, let's get some garlic ready to go. Probably, depending on the size of your cloves and your love of garlic, 3 to 4 cloves. Pop your cloves out of their skin, and then we will go ahead and give them a rough chop. And this whole sauce will get pureed together, so you don't need to worry about any of these cuts being super precise. All sins are hidden in the puree, so just do what comes naturally. Onions are frying away beautifully. In about another minute, I will add some salt and some oregano and a pinch of sugar. You don't need to add the sugar, especially if you're making this with fresh tomatoes and it's the height of season and they're sweet all on their own. You don't need the sugar. But to taste, or if your tomatoes are a little bit more on the acidic side, it sometimes adds that little just elevation that really goes beautifully, whether you're using this sauce for pizza or for pasta or for dunking grilled cheese into or spooning into your mouth. I'm not sure what you're doing with it, but it will be good. So the onions have been frying away about 3 minutes at this point. I'm going to add the salt now. Why? Because I find that adding the salt after that first bit of water has evaporated away from the onions creates a second evaporation, even more concentration of their oniony flavor. So start with about a half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and you can always add more. I am also going to add my oregano at this point, about a half a teaspoon of dried oregano going right over top. Little pinch of chili flake if you like it with the heat. Our little pinch of sugar, like half a teaspoon, guys, just a tiny little bit. And then our garlic. Heaven. And give that a quick stir. I so wish there were smell-o-vision on the situation, guys. The blooming of the garlic in the hot oil, that fragrant hit of the onion and the chili flake. It's beyond. It's beyond. That's pretty much it. Now we just kind of let this cook another like 3 minutes. Then I will add, I am using canned peeled tomatoes. You definitely want to get a Roma tomato if you're using fresh, just because they have a great concentrated flavor and they usually tend to be in season throughout the year, or you can find them decent throughout the year, I should say. Although if you have sun gold tomatoes and you want to do that recipe, that is one that I showed you last year, last summertime. Fresh sun gold tomato sauce cannot be beat. It is phenomenal. But cherry tomatoes, gorgeous, obviously, too. Any tomato where it's a really dense concentration of flavor, ripe, beautiful, great to use. But jarred peeled tomatoes work very well. So if you're looking for a no stress version, that is the move. Oh my gosh. The color is starting to change ever so slightly, which I mentioned is what I like. I want that little bit of golden brown happening here, which is just the mark of sugars caramelizing in the mix. So it'll be even sweeter and more delightful. Especially now that I've added the garlic, you don't want to let it cook more than 2 minutes or so here, max. The garlic should be fragrant, not burnt. And now in with our 2 jars of peeled whole San Marzano tomatoes. So just stir it all together. And now this is going to cook away as long as possible. If you have a couple hours just to let this simmer slowly on the stove, you will get infinitely more just sweet and mellow and beautifully fresh tasting sauce. But even half an hour here just to heat everything up, blend those flavors together, and then we will puree into simple Pomodoro perfection. Leave a little vent. You want this to simmer, not boil, and you want a little bit of the liquid to be able to evaporate. The more we can concentrate the sauce and rust it and cook the tomatoes gently, have them soaking up the flavor of the garlic and the onion, the happier we will be. The tomatoes have been cooking away here happily for about 15 minutes. If you have a tomato masher and feel so inclined, you can start to break the tomatoes up a little bit at this point. Really, if you want to leave it kind of textural and fun, this is a great way to do that. This is just going to help ensure that every little bit of the tomato starts to cook into the sauce and makes our life easier when we go to puree it, and gives you optionality if you decide not to puree it. And frankly, is a bit easier now that the tomatoes have started to soften, and a bit less messy than doing it by hand when they're raw. Oh my gosh. What was I saying about mess? That's something I think I just mentioned. The final 5 minutes of cooking, not longer because fresh herbs are so delicate. You're gonna add in some fresh leaves of basil, like a nice big handful like so, right into the sauce. Stir that around, let it cook another 5 minutes. Then we're gonna kill the heat, let it cool ever so slightly just so we don't scald ourselves when we are blending it. And we will use our immersion blender to puree it as smooth as you'd like. My grandpa likes to leave it a little bit chunky, which I happen to love. If you're a fan of a very smooth tomato puree, take it to town. Honestly, you could basically drink this as soup, so you could take it all the way smooth. And for pizza, I do like it pretty smooth, so that's what we're using today. Okay, so the basil has cooked in this sauce about 5 minutes. You can see how lovely and thick the sauce has gotten. The surface isn't really moving very much anymore. It's just those little pockets of air escaping. That's a good indication that the sauce beneath is really concentrated and glorious. As I stir, it's very thick and saucy. You also kind of want to let it coat the back of a spoon, which it does there. Oh my gosh, this is so delicious. Delicious, delicious, delicious. Making your own sauce, it's this easy. And then you're never going to run out. You're going to be able to make it anytime you need. Oh, the little hit of chili flake going on in there, so good. If you wanted to add a splash of white wine, my grandpa does that sometime, but I don't feel like it's a necessary, although I never say no. That little tiny hit of sugar, just jazzing it up ever so slightly. Plenty of garlic popping through, onion obviously present, and the tomatoes are star with that fresh basil, just like a ding at the top. Okay, so the sauce is lovely and cooled. I'm just gonna give it a quick blitz with an immersion blender. You can also ladle this into batches into a vented blender if you prefer, but this is nice and easy. Let's scrape it down, give it a taste, season with more salt or sugar or whatever you might desire. Or nothing at all if it's literally perfect. So delicious. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you don't want to see little flecks of basil in your pasta dish, you're too persnickety and it tastes delicious and you want them there. But if you really need it totally pureed, you can put this in a high-powered blender with that vent, just in case any of the steam is being released, and really get it very fine. I actually love the look of the fresh basil in there because it just shows how handmade this is. Or you could scoop the fresh basil leaves out before you puree, and then you'll just have the essence of the basil and not the texture or the color of it. And this is now ready for ladling into containers to freeze if you'd like, to use over pasta, but for today, to use on pizza. And this is my kids' favorite pie. Dough onto our floured peel with a little semolina flour down there so it slides easily off onto your pizza stone or into your pizza oven. A little bit of sauce. You don't want to go crazy here. Just a little bit to flavor the center of your pie once you have a lovely spiral of sauce. Then, as like the easiest, most delicious little pasta topping right there, dinner for one, dinner for two, a romantic pasta dinner, pizza for your kids. You're like, it's like 12 meals in one. It's perfect. A little low moisture shredded mozzarella scattered over top, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, that extra hit of salt and lactic love, a little bit of olive oil. This is kind of a sneaky thing, but you do want a little swizzle of olive oil over top, a little crunch of salt. Quickly onto your pizza stone. 15 minutes. Ding, dinner is ready. Let it cool, and then the kids can come enjoy. All right, pizza party!